You are listening to the Freedom Podcast with Van Moody. Our desire is that you begin to live in freedom every day. Freedom in your mind, freedom in your finances, freedom from the external pressures of life. Prepare to be transformed as we seek to be free, mind, body, and soul. Let's get started.
So you guys, you talked about your past and how it has affected you're here now, and then whether or not things have changed. For me, my story is kind of a summation of all you guys, because when I think about it, my brother and I were the first two black students at a Christian school back home in North Carolina. He was 2 years younger than me, so I was the first. And so I went through, K through fourth grade as being, one of two blacks in that school. And my parents actually took me out of that school because, one of the white girls at the school, called me a nigger, and it shocked me because it was the first time I'd ever heard someone call me that. I've heard other people being called that, and so there were some words. There was some,
Christian school, right?
Yeah, it was a Christian school.
At a Christian school.
At a Christian school. There were some words that were said, to try to figure out what exactly did she say, which ended up I ended up in the principal's office. You did. I ended up in the principal's office. So not having an advocate, because it was her words against mine, so my parents were called to the school. And ultimately, I did not, return after being there from kindergarten to fourth grade. Fast forward to 2 years ago, our son, who's now 11, but was 8 or 9 at the time, and we were going through the presidential elections, and one of his classmates told him that he hoped that the president, who was trending, became president, because if that was the case, then his family would own my family and own him.
Oh, wow.
And so you look at whether or not things have changed, and we've made some strides, but we clearly haven't come too far, from that same mentality. And it was tough because how do you have that conversation with your son?
Yeah, mine had slapped somebody and been like,
yeah. And the fear.
That's tough.
The fear, because like you said before, they're cute, they're nice, they're non-threatening, until he becomes 12, 13, 14 years old, and he's walking down the street like he was doing for the last couple of years. And now he's a threat, and it's tough because it hurt, to be able to have to look at your son, have to have these conversations, but it also is kind of a wake up call, because irrespective of our degrees or our pedigrees, the neighborhoods that we live in, we still have to have these conversations, and we have to make sure that our kids stay grounded. And it's just unfortunate.
Yeah, so all of you have raised an interesting question that I want to pose. How do we shake off the questions of identity, questions of worth, questions of value that I think inherently come with what we've had to navigate and fight being black men in this society? Because on the backside of growing up with the reality of race and racism, we have to deal with things like you talked about identity. You talked about, feeling like you'd arrived because of the money, but then when something came up missing, you realized that, well, you were not that as accepted as you thought you were. And we get it from both sides. We mentioned earlier about this notion of being too educated in one sense to be fully accepted by a black community, not being, fully accepted by a white community. I was thinking about James Baldwin, who said that an educated man in America, educated Negro in America, really had no place, right? But how do we process through that, or how can we process through that? And I raise that question, and I tell you a couple of stories to put it into context, because you have things like colorism. You've got the effects of internal racialized oppression, right? That when you internalize this notion of you're not good enough, or you can't fly, or you can't be a film composer, and you've got this internal battle to try to break through all of that. And I know that I wrestled with it in my life. My kids, since kindergarten, were in a Christian school that we're now taking them out of. There were only 2 black families in that Christian school, and the only other black person that my kids saw was the janitor. Wow. And so you've got this evangelical Christian school, and now you've got evangelicalism mixed in with white nationalism, and we just had to make the harsh decision to take our kids out of this school and put them in another school that is not Christian and is probably really far on the left, which means we have to compromise some things for our faith because our kids need more diversity. And so all of that is a struggle. And then I'll tell you the story to put it into context, even from my own life. I remember I was a freshman at the university that I attended for undergrad. I was the only black person in the class. And what the white kids did was, it was their way to try to punk me. And so what they did, we were waiting, it was intro to political science, I'll never forget this. We were waiting on a professor to come into class. And professors are late, they get there whenever they want to get there. And the white kids started going around the room, and they started saying to everybody else in the room, what was your SAT score? What was your SAT score? Right? You're talking about, high scores, perfect scores. Really up there. I think I maybe had like an 1140 or something like that. I had the lowest SAT score in the room, and they got to me last. And it was their way of saying, you don't deserve to be here. Yeah. But what happened in me, though, and this is where I'm coming to the question of how we navigate it, and I want to toss it to you first, Dr. Ulmer, because you've done this well longer than all of us. But what I made up in my mind, and I don't know if it's healthy, but it was my way of coping. And I've had to subsequently kind of unpack that. But I just made it up in my mind. I said, well, all of y'all may be smarter than me, but nobody's going to work harder than me. Mm-hmm. And so I had this coping mechanism that if you study 2 hours, I'm going to study 4 hours. Mm-hmm. If it took you 6 hours to do a project, I'm going to do it 12 hours. But I recognize that that also is a slippery slope, because we can build our life thinking that if you just do all the work, then that equates with success, or that equates with identity, or that it equates with value in terms of who you are. And none of that's true. Like we are accepted in Christ. Our identity has nothing to do with how culture or society views us. But oftentimes all of that gets muddled because we're just trying to make it through this maze. Yeah. And so how have you guys navigated through it? Or, Dr. Ulmer, what wisdom, can you provide having done this so well at such a high level?
I don't know if it's wisdom, because I'm still struggling with it. I'm 74 years old, man, and it's like I said earlier, I would have assumed that some of this stuff was gone. I think from so many things in my mind, my dad, my mom had the talk with me, and as it relates to going to school, saying you got to work harder, you got to stay up longer, and all that. I went to University of Illinois, and the only social life we had was fraternities and sororities. That was our community, that was our culture. But it was 212 black people on campus, undergrad and grad, out of 20,000 students. There were 212, undergrad and grad. We would always laugh because you guys, in Morehouse and places like that, y'all make frat lines of 20, 30, you know. We had 2 or 3 gathered in his name, you know. We had linettes, you know. Shoot, man, you know. But it was always in your face, you know. But I think again, part of my struggle is I never forget that my counselor saying, "You can't make it here." And a few years ago, when we got ready to buy the Forum, I had another, kind of like you, look in my face and said, well, "You can't do that. You know, you won't be a film, you know, writer." And we're trying to buy the Forum, and the guy said, and was very sarcastic. You know, he said, "Well, Reverend, you've done pretty good building a church, you know, but you can't do this. You've never done this before. How are you going to do this? You know." And you know, it was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I've been turned down many times. You know, I knew he wasn't going to give me the money, so by then I'm pissed off. You know, and I said, "I'm going to just like that." Hit the table. I said, "I'm going to do just like you white boys do. I'm going to hire somebody that can do what I can't do. I'm going to run a first-class operation. This meeting is over. Thank you very much." You know, but still, I'm still facing with, you know, my struggle right now, and that's why I may not be a good source of wisdom, because my struggle right now is, and it's a spiritual one. It's a spiritual one. I have to learn, and I'm still learning, to at least give people the benefit of the doubt. You know, I'm still suspicious. You know, my trust level is real short, man. You know, and I'm still wrestling with that. And then with the thing we talked about, the election over and over again, and the whole that piece, that was a wake-up call for me. That people that I thought were my friends, I thought were close, you know, of the other persuasion, and I'm saying, and I did a talk about it. I said, where are you guys? You know, you come to my church, I come to your church, you take photos and put it in your mission report and all that kind of stuff. But hey, this thing is where I'm out here by myself, you know, and so I'm still struggling with the trust issue. You know, it takes me a little while, you know, but you do, and all of us have learned this. You learn how to play the game. Yes, that's right. You learn how to play the game, man. You know, be it in a corporate room, be it in academics, you know, be it in sports, whatever. You learn how to play the game, and I think we still need to teach our kids how to play the game. You know, I still wait when the news report comes out. You know, 9 people got shot. You know, and I'm saying, was it a brother?
Yeah.
You know,
I do the silent prayer.
And I'm embarrassed. I'm embarrassed.
Right.
I say, whew,
exactly.
It ain't one us. You
Yes.
know, you know, I'm still doing that.
Yes.
Still doing that. Yeah. It's still an ongoing struggle, man. And I'm still wrestling with it. I am still, low these many years later, I'm still wrestling with it. And I find for me, I have to shift from the sociological realities, from the industrial realities, from the systemic realities to, you know, if it had not been for the Lord on my side, you know, I probably got kicked out of here a long time ago, you know. But I have to go to that place because I see in the reality of the culture stuff that still makes me suspicious, stuff that still, you know, if I had not come through some stuff would make me insecure. I don't want my kids to be insecure. I want them to know you are as good as they are. And whether you gotta do, you know, study longer or whatever it is, but you are, and that's what was drilled into my heart and my mind. And yet I find myself, you know, 60 years later, still having to do the same thing.
Thank you for being transparent on that.
Yeah. Wow, man.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm often, my son and I have a mantra, you know, I ask him, you know, who are you? And his response is, you know, I'm a Moody man, I'm a Christian man, and I'm a black man. And we do that back and forth because I want him to know that he's good enough, you know, and I always dote over my daughter and tell her how beautiful she is and how smart she is and how talented she is, because I want them to know that they're good enough. You know, and my struggle as they get older is that I feel like I'm running out of time to drill it into them, because I know when they leave the nest, the world is going to try to tell them the exact opposite.
Which is the same thing they told me 65 years ago.
Exactly.
Same stuff, man.
How have you guys navigated it without becoming bitter and jaded?
Real quick, so 2 things. One, during the pandemic, and I actually kind of appreciate everything that went down with the previous administration because it showed me the playing field. It showed me, who the players are, what they were. Yeah. It showed me everything that I needed to see. Those who would mask behind, fun cookouts at the, the neighborhood pool, really show what's up when, this come down and they leave when I come down there. Yeah. So I love that because it made me very aware of these individuals, which, kind of opened up my third eye. Secondly, my wife and I just really had a conversation, and we realized for so long, because we too were taught like, you have to work harder, you have to do all these different things, that, we decided to just take a page out of their playbook, and we just decided to accept nepotism. Like, we decided to accept it. Like, no longer will we say, hey, no, don't ask for help with someone. If Bishop says, hey, you know what, I want to give your daughter a job, take it. Take it, because at the end of, because we miss so much trying to prove something to someone else when that person we're trying to prove it to ain't even there looking. They so far beyond, they ain't even looking at us. We're too busy looking at them from behind. No. Accept all that. Whatever come to you, hey Jay, I'm gonna give you some money to help your kids. Thank you. You don't have to put in a proposal. I'm not gonna give you one then. I'm okay with that, and I'm good with that comes behind it. So we're teaching. We kind of had to reprogram myself to say, hey, you know what? It's okay to accept favors from us. It's okay to be considered, individuals who enjoy elitism, because we work hard for that. We work hard for the organization that we belong to, the neighborhood that we went, and our social circle. So I'm fine with what comes behind that. I'm not going to reject the success of my friends, my family, because I want to prove something to someone who is not even there to watch it. So we're going to accept favors and that. Good, and then the second thing was with my company, I did this thing called, I made this up. It's called the reverse Popeyes theory. Because I'm not a really big person who like to be on TV. If you remember the Popeyes commercial that had the black lady that was shucking and jiving, and they made it seem like she was the CEO, when in actuality, we know that she wasn't. The white lady was. And so anytime I would get on the news with my company or do anything that was publicized, my company pays the analytics, and I took this from Bishop Van, like I always watch the analytics. I watch the analytics and it will go up with likes, but never translated to money. So what I did was one of my employees, who is definitely one of the most upstanding, Anglo-Saxons, she, is like, blonde hair, blue eyes, former gymnast from Auburn, put her on TV, and that translates to money. We get corporate, they say, hey, we want to do this, different organizations, homeschool networks, they say, we want to buy your services. And then when I show up in the boardroom, they're like, oh, at the end of the day, sign the check over, But so those are the 2 things that I definitely feel like we picked up. And that helps me from not being so bitter.
That's so good. Yeah. That's real, man.
To that point, professionally, I had to learn how to push boundaries of systems from the inside. And a lot of that was about code switching, but also just a couple of things. One, building up my own self-identity. Yeah. And a lot of that came from my faith and maturing in my understanding of who I was as a believer. But it also, I started surrounding myself with people that were doing what I wanted to do that weren't just black. I tried to learn from as many different types of people as I could. One of the first things that I did when I was starting this institution now was that choosing a board chair was really critical. And I picked an older white male, the same age as you, who was the head of security for the Republican Party in the state of Alabama. Everybody was looking at me like, man, what are you doing? I was like, oh, you all don't understand how things work. And it was not that, it was almost kind of reversing the system on itself to where, I knew that me by myself wasn't going to be validated in the spaces that I needed. And so I had to find someone that could provide political coverage. Just understanding politics is one of the hardest lessons and one of the best lessons that I had to figure out to be successful. And even looking at, financially, you know, just listening to those types of conversations that were happening with white people that had wealth and how they looked at wealth. Yeah. You know, I grew up around black folks that wanted to be rich, and there was a difference between wealth and being rich. But I didn't, you know, I had to take some tough losses. And then I had to have some things fall apart by trying to work with black folks. I still do, don't get me wrong, but there comes a place and a space where you've got to choose who's most qualified. Yeah. And if you can find a black person or a person of color that meets that, then that's great. But otherwise, you've got to figure out, number one, like what is it that, you know, the person in control, because that's really the difference where race and class kind of intersect. And that's the other piece that I had to learn, that, you know, there's some white people that don't like poor white people just as much as they don't like poor black people. Yeah. And that's just the reality. But I also recognize it still doesn't matter how much wealth you can acquire as a black person, you're still black.
You still black, buddy.
And so that's going to be
it's called the story of OJ.
Yeah, that's a deciding factor. But how can you navigate those systems and figure out as much as you can learn to accomplish what it is you're trying to accomplish?
You know, for me, I have had to, I think I've overcome by dealing with this one thing, fear. And being afraid that I would get another response. You can't do this because. I've kind of put that come so far at the back of my mind in my interactions. I think in my experiences, have gone overboard to make sure that I develop relationships with people that don't look like me. And that's kind of been like the secrets, you know, secret sauce, you know, for me, where I would be willing to where many of my peers wouldn't just go hang out. You know, I was like, you know, I'm gonna go beyond and really like try to give the benefit of the doubt. Yeah. You know, like if you tell me you're racist, then I'll believe it. But then I'm trying to figure out, well, okay, how do you think, you know, what do you think? And being a tenure, for me, it was like being in education and a tenured professor in a university without a PhD. And I'm a black man. Yeah. So it would be interesting. It was interesting to me to see how that thing would reveal itself amongst different types of people. Yeah. However, what I discovered at my university is that these people really, really care for me and are really a great group of people that don't look like me. It was hard for me to accept that and to embrace that, but it was the fear. Like, let me just have a conversation. I'm talking about just have a conversation. Yeah. And if y'all know me, well, he like, I kind of say some out stuff. I say it to white people. You know, like, you remember that one movie where he says, man, he was talking about nigga, he said, yeah, he told the white guy, just say it. Like, that's me. Just say it, just say it. You know you want to say it, say it. Like, no. But as a result, it, you know, at the same time, once people understand me and my faith in the intensity of it, you know, I use that same thing to minister to people and then draw them into my space, and then it's helped me. Now, I want to turn this one corner, because what really, really, really freed me is realizing that Peter was a racist. The man that preached the inaugural message of the Holy Spirit on earth was a racist. He would be what we define or categorize as one, right? And God changed him.
Well, I mean, that's a perfect segue to this final thought that I want to tee up. And then, Dr. Ulmer, I'd love for you to maybe have the final word on this. I think for me, what helped me and what freed me was when, through Christ, I learned to be okay with me, regardless of how anybody else viewed me, knowing how my Heavenly Father viewed me.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode of the Freedom Podcast. For a broader range of topics, go to Van Moody's YouTube page or visit twccc.org.